Alice in Wonderland, Chapter 8, Part 1. The Queen's Croquet Ground. There was a large rose tree at the garden's entrance. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners painting them red. Suddenly, they saw Alice approaching them. "Excuse me, but why are you painting the roses red?" asked Alice. The gardeners were 3 cards. They told Alice that this was supposed to be a red rose tree, but they planted a white rose tree instead. "If the Queen finds out, she'll cut off our heads," they added in a frightened whisper. At that moment, one of the cards, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out, "The Queen! The Queen!" And the 3 gardeners instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked around, eager to see the Queen. First came 10 card soldiers carrying clubs, with their hands and feet at the corners. Then 10 card courtiers, ornamented all over with diamonds. After them came the 10 royal children, all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the White Rabbit. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. And at the end of this grand procession came the King and Queen of Hearts. Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the 3 gardeners, but she could not remember ever having heard of such a rule at processions. Besides, what would be the use of a procession, thought she, if people had all to lie down upon their faces so that they couldn't see it? So she stood still where she was and waited. When the procession came to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her. The Queen saw Alice and asked severely, "Who is this?" She said it to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "Idiot," said the Queen, tossing her head impatiently, and turning to Alice, she went on, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, Your Majesty," said Alice very politely. "And who are these?" said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying around the rose tree. For, you see, as they were lying on their faces, and the pattern on their backs was the same as the rest of the pack, she could not tell whether they were gardeners, or soldiers, or courtiers, or 3 of her own children. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed, "Off with her head! Off!" "Nonsense," said Alice very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, "Consider, my dear, that she is only a child." The Queen turned angrily away from him and said to the Knave, "Turn them over." The Knave did so, very carefully, with one foot. "Get up," said the Queen in a shrill, loud voice, and the 3 gardeners instantly jumped up. "What have you been doing here?" "Please, Your Majesty," said one of the cards, in a very humble tone, "we were trying—" "I see," said the Queen, who had been examining the roses. "Off with their heads." And the procession moved on, 3 of the soldiers remaining behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners who ran to Alice for protection. She put them into a large flower pot that stood near her. The three soldiers wandered about for a minute or two looking for them, and then quietly marched off after the others. "Are their heads off?" shouted the queen. "Their heads are gone, if it pleases your majesty," the soldiers shouted in reply. Grunting in reply, the queen turned to Alice. "Can you play croquet?" she shouted. "Yes," said Alice loudly. "Come on then," roared the queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. "Fine day, isn't it?" said a timid voice to Alice. She was walking by the White Rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush!" said the rabbit in a low, hurried tone. He looked anxiously over his shoulder as he spoke, and then raised himself up on tiptoe, put his mouth close to her ear, and whispered, "She is sentenced to be executed." "What? But why?" asked Alice, shocked. "She boxed the queen's ears," the rabbit said. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. "Quiet!" the rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. "The queen will hear you. You see, she came rather late." And the queen said, "Get to your places," shouted the queen in a voice of thunder, and everyone began running about in all directions, tumbling up against one another. They got settled down in a minute or two, and the game began. End of part 1, chapter 8. Stay tuned for part 2.